Rebel Moon Part 2, The Scargiver is out, and it somehow managed to be worse than the first part, which I actually can't believe that I'm saying. The characters are nothing. We get some massive exposition dumps to function as character. The action is terrible. The slow motion is self-indulgent. Zack Snyder's world building is the equivalent of if you gave a child a box of toys and said, make me a story. And he would just pull out Godzilla and a Marine and a samurai and a monster and a giant spider and then just slam it all together and say, here you go. I feel bad for the actors, actresses, composers, VFX team. All the surface level stuff is fine. The performances are fine, but the story is absolutely nonsensical and the action is also just horrendous. So let's just get into this movie. So we start off, our villain that was already defeated is brought back to life somehow. Even though you knew he was going to be based on the end of the first one, still doesn't make a ton of sense when he fell like 1,000 feet and they just plug him into a bunch of colorful cables and he's back to life. And the intro is kind of funny. It includes just like a minute and a half of explanation of the last movie, and it's all just names and places. There's no way that you could just watch this movie and understand any of it. So you have to watch part one anyway for that to even make sense. So we pick up right where we left off. They're back at the village, and now the village is going to stand up to the evil, mean empire. The plotline is so dumb in the first part that I thought, well, maybe they'll do a time jump and say that a bunch of forces gathered, and now they have some kind of rebellion. But no, we're continuing on with a village of literal farmers against an intergalactic empire. And of course, you know they're going to win, because that's what the point of the movie is. Just unreal how incompetent this makes the bad guy. Again, there's a lot of stuff that makes the villains in this movie incompetent, including the fact that they need a small village of farmers to provide them enough food for this giant ship. Like, how could they not grow their own food? How much can this food even really provide? It's a village of like 100 people maybe, and not even all of them are farming because there's old people and women and children and stuff. So the antagonists are stupid because they can't even manage their own food. They need this little village. Last movie, they blow up an entire planet that was super nice and super developed, probably had a ton of food, and they can't even beat this little group in a fight. So this little handful of people is going to train farmers for 2 days and then win a big battle. That's the plot of this movie. So the one Marine left, who wasn't part of the bad Marines, stayed in the village. He's still giving messages back to Noble, and he finds out that the Empire is going to be there in 5 days to come collect the grain. Titus asked, how long will it take? They say half a cycle, which is presumably about 2 weeks. And he says, okay, well, you have 3 days. So of course they get it done. We get to see slow motion farming. It's unbelievable. Zack Snyder manages to be both pretentious and an absolute retard. So props to him for that feat, I guess. So in this 5-day window that they have, that the evil empire is just kindly giving them, because we see that Noble knows that they're all dead and that the Scargiver is here, which is Korra. So he just lets them have the 5 days anyway. Stupid. So the fact that it would take about 2 weeks to harvest, they do it in 3 days, and then still have 2 days to train somehow. Anyway, as far as the name Scargiver goes, it's just cringe. I'm sure it's supposed to be double meaning, like, oh, she messes people up and emotionally scars them. It's just a dumb name. And also, if your reputation is you give people scars, kind of makes it sound like you don't kill them all, which I think makes you sound less intimidating, but whatever. Korra and Gunnar bone, and he's the only character that has like kind of an arc, but he's also just really all over the place, so it's kind of hard to care about him. So they hook up, and then we get a big exposition dump for her character that probably should have taken place in the first movie. And essentially you find out that Balsarius assassinated the king and queen and ordered her to shoot the princess. So she did. The way that it's done is just crazy. They have an orchestra in the background here who's playing music, and the music is also serving as the soundtrack. And it seems like he wanted to rip off like the Reigns of Castamere here from Game of Thrones, where when the song starts playing, everybody in the show is like, oh shit, because they recognize what it is right away. But this one, they just kind of play music, and then as the king and queen are getting stabbed to death, they're just playing like thematic music as if they're playing the soundtrack, which they are playing the soundtrack, but they're acting like they know they're playing the soundtrack. So she shoots the princess, and then Balsarius calls her the assassin and blames her for everything, so she runs. How she escapes this, I have no idea. They're literally surrounded by military people right here, and they just kind of off-screen it. But she gets through an entire ship of people just by herself, where there's presumably hundreds of guards because the king and queen were there. So nice job with those logistics. I had the screen pause just on to mess with copyright shit. But this scene right here is in slow motion. Literally slow motion farming. We've only got 2 hours. We've had no character work in the first 2.5. And also something that's funny about their plan is that their plan is to hide behind the grain so they can't get shot. And I think what Zack Snyder was ripping off here, because that's pretty much what this movie feels like, is like 10 different movies ripped off, is like a Dune thing. In Doom, one of the big messages from Paul's dad, Leto, is whoever's willing to destroy something controls it. And it seems like that's what he's going for here. Like, we control the grain because we're willing to destroy it. But this is just retarded. So it's kind of irrelevant. And I like the actor that plays Noble, but this character is just awful. He gives a big speech here about how he wants to keep the scar from the Scargiver so that he can bare his chest and get himself a seat in the Senate because it'll be symbolic. Like, he just explains what the idea is for him keeping the scar straight into the camera. So they're Skype calling the little Asian guy who's the only one left at the village, and immediately Noble's like, everyone else is dead, and he's chosen his side. So instead of just moving in right now, after they lost a ship to these people in the last movie, they just take their time, and they go land like they're going to negotiate with them, even though they're supposed to be super evil and authoritarian, which you're going to find out from everyone's exposition backstory here in about 10 minutes. So we waste a few minutes with the village, and the little village girl gives them all flags and explains their importance to them and blah, blah, blah. All just kind of a snooze fest, honestly, because we don't know anything about these characters, don't particularly care about any of them, so you can probably just fast forward through this. So here's the training montage. It's them learning how to shoot guns, which is fine, but part of their training is also just swinging a knife at hay stickmen. Not sure what good that does when you have one day to swing a knife, like what you're going to learn. The guns, you can at least get a little bit of accuracy and practice. And also, there's a really weird line in here, too, where Cora tells this girl, keep both eyes open when she's shooting. I'm not going to claim to be a gun expert. I went to one gun safety course and shot a pistol. But one of the first things they tell you is to figure out your dominant eye so you can close your other eye and just use your dominant eye to look down the sight. Kind of a weird thing they just threw in there. This is the scary empire that's going to lose to farmers who trained for a half a day. So we go through the training. We get one of the biggest exposition dumps I've ever seen. This exposition dump is so blatant and direct in substitute of any actual character writing that I almost wonder if Zack Snyder at this point is like, I want to see how loyal my fans are. This is just unreal to me. If you go by runtime and treat this all as one movie, we're about 3 hours and 15 minutes in out of 4.5 hours at this point. And Titus sits down at the table and says everyone needs to talk about their secrets, which is essentially saying, why are you fighting the evil empire? So we literally just sit here for like 15 minutes and each one just gives their backstory and their motivations. And then that's it for character work. This is actually one of the criticisms I made of the Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare over the weekend, is that in the first 10 minutes of that movie, they give you an exposition about why each character hates Nazis, and then they just go. And you don't ever really care about the characters again. This one, they saved that for 75% of the way through the two movies combined. I still would have thought it was lazy, but I might have been okay with it if in the first movie, as they were collecting their crew, they were like, look, we want to trust you. We need to understand why you want to fight with us. And then you get a flashback, get their backstory, move on. I wouldn't call it great writing, but at least it's something. This is just crazy. Like, we're going to sit down at dinner and just run 15 minutes of flashbacks so you understand who all the characters are now that you've spent over 3 hours with them. So Titus goes first. He was working for the evil empire. He betrayed them because he didn't like an order they gave, and they killed his men in front of him. I actually don't even mind that as a backstory as much as why did they not just execute him? You can see he's on the ground here just crying as his men get blown up from space. Or why did they not throw him in jail? You know, the idea is fine, but this is just nonsensical. Every character except for Titus just has the backstory of, I lived in a small colony, they came and fucked my shit up, I want revenge. So this chick, whose name I can't even be bothered to remember, I just remember her mouth unhinging like a snake to scream in the first one. That's her story. She's working. For some reason, they come blow up her village, and the rebellion saved them, so she joined. And we get a little Ray Fisher cameo. This chick, same deal. She was in her village. It got attacked. The swords awakened her generations of warrior shit or something, and now she's mad. She cuts off her own arms and puts on robo arms, which, if it's as easy as just cutting them off and plopping on robo arms, I don't know why everyone wouldn't do it, but whatever. The American Indian dude who actually fights in this movie with fucking axes, similar story. He was the prince in some backwater. His parents got killed. He was prince of nothing. Now he's mad. Corey just gives a non-answer. And it's kind of funny because this undercuts what they wanted to be a payoff at the end of the movie. So at the end of the movie, she admits that she's Athaleria or whatever, the princess assassin and traitor, and she was feared by everyone and whatever. And Titus is like, I already knew that. But it would have been a lot more interesting if she had admitted that here. And then you can do the thing while the characters are either pissed off or they're like, oh, well, that's not who you are now, or we're still with you, whatever. Some kind of emotional bonding. Nah, fuck that shit. Not in Zack Snyder's movies. He's just trying to get to the slow motion, baby. Earlier, we found out that Cora still had her ship from when she ran away initially. It's still nearby in the village and it still works. And she goes and talks to the robot, and he's like, yeah, I'll come fight. Even though we've seen nothing from him in like 3.5 hours of screen time, except that he has antlers on now. I guess they couldn't afford to get Anthony Hopkins for more lines or something, I don't know. So this is something else I want to talk about with their plan for defense. Their plan is to put the women and children in a separate building. They hole up behind the grain, and that way they can't get nuked from orbit. They also dig a bunch of underground tunnels magically in like a day. No clue how they did that. And it's all part of their fortifications. They run this scan from their ship, and they can literally see people in the buildings. In the first movie, he can tell that the soil on the planet is really good for farming to the point where he can estimate how much they should be able to harvest. So I don't believe for a second they can detect that level of specificity, but not see underground tunnels and not see their setup and their traps and whatever. The whole premise is just so stupid. The technology is just all over the place. It makes no sense. So they kind of redo the scene from the first movie where they meet to negotiate, but it's not actually a negotiation. And I don't know why they made her cut her hair like this. First of all, I'm tired of the trope that people cut their hair and it's like a symbolic thing of the change of their heart or whatever. But also, can we just let pretty women be pretty women and not make her have what I would consider to be a bad haircut for even like a 10-year-old boy? I just don't get it. Anyway, she tells him again that she's going to kill him. He says, I'll kill everybody here unless you come with me. I'll exchange you for the villagers. So she says okay, and Gunnar, in a really weirdly out of character act, is suddenly impulsive and brave, and he shoots the gong, which signals the beginning of their attack. So they shoot a rocket launcher into one of their ships and blow it up. How they weren't aware of the underground people, I don't know. Why they parked so close that this could happen, I don't know. The whole logistics of this fight make no sense. So they pull up here with like maybe 100 guys and 4 ships, and then they come in waves, and each wave gets more powerful like a video game, instead of just rolling up in tanks like they should. Or blow up everything around where they have their grain stored, because they could tell that from space also. So anyway, after this idiocy, the fight starts. The fight might be dumber than the rest of the story. It's hard for me to say which is worse. This is a really funny part of the action. The ship is like, we need to lift off after the rocket launcher, and it takes like a full minute for them to get a few feet off the ground and like slowly spin around. Enough time for Gunnar's brother to throw a bomb into the back of their open ship. And it's just like, this is a spaceship. It can't just lift up or fly away or close the back. And even then, with all that being stupid and slow, at least the pilot had seen the bomb and been like, oh shit, and tried to fly upward to get it to fall out, and then it blows up. At least that's something to show they're not fully fucking retarded. And there's a ton of this type of stuff all throughout the action, which is like the rest of the movie. Why anyone has swords in this world, I do not know. They don't have the force, they don't have magic. They're still blocking bullets with it. Right before this, I didn't show it. One of the Kryptean sword guys goes after the Asian military guy, deflects bullets, and then just punches him down instead of just cutting him in half. And then one of the blue sword guys slowly walks up to the girl with like the grenade launcher and just takes one to the chest. Like, I know this was originally written as a Star Wars movie, but the reason that lightsabers work and can deflect blaster fire is because they have the force. You just have regular people blocking laser fire. If they could do this, then they would just be dodging bullets all the time with actual gunfire. So the whole sword thing is just stupid. Just more piss poor world building that it seems like Zack Snyder has no impulse control. And it's like, oh, this would be cool. Just throw it in there. Don't worry about continuity or anything logical at all. Gunnar's brother fights Noble because he jumps up onto the ramp, gets stabbed, falls like 200 feet, clearly dead. No one ever talks about it again. Just forgotten. And it's not even really emotional because we don't know anything about him. So again, just great use of the characters we spent time with by giving them nothing to make them meaningful at all. I actually like Cora and Gunnar's plan here. They use her ship that she escaped with and then open the hatch and stick a smoke grenade in it and pretend to be injured. So then when the other ships fly back to the main ship, they fly with them. They're like, hey, my ship's been shot, I'm wounded, need help. And they use that to get inside, which is decently clever. That's nice. Score 1 for Zach. There you go. You can see the shot of her ship smoking, and then she's given the big ship control of her little ship to bring it in. Unfortunately, we go straight back to the idiocy. Their plan was to hide behind the grain so they wouldn't get shot. I thought they were going to pile them up like sandbags and essentially force the soldiers to work around them to not shoot the grain up. But instead, they just run out into an open field and then all fire. The fact that any of them lived through this is just asinine. And then there's stuff like this too, where Titus runs into this bridge and you can see just on screen, there's over half a dozen guys looking at him. And then he flips this guy over him and he's just standing in front of nothing. And their bolts that they shoot don't even go through people, so they should just unload on him. But of course, he's fine. And one of their guys, one of those undetectable underground holes, blows everything up in it, kills a few guys, but there's still a shitload left. I guess it's a decent move. But when you have like less than 100 people who can fight, sacrificing one's a pretty big move. It just kind of knocks some guys down and takes a few out. Dual lightsaber chick gets an arm cut off. Eventually she dies. She takes out like 3 people, which is kind of lame for how much they built her up. And this little boy and her have a moment. And the only setup for this was that he tried to tease her with a piece of hay when she was napping while they were farming. Great emotional bond they have there. Another great use of 4.5 hours of screen time to not set up your payoffs. I just wanted to share this screen because I thought it was funny. It looks like Titus kicked a hunter in the chest and he's just got orange shit coming out of him everywhere. Because all of this shit is slow motion, obviously, so it takes forever to watch. And again, just one of the dumbest things in the whole movie is the, I guess, American Indian guy dual-wielding axes and no armor and no shirt in the battlefield. And I'm supposed to believe that he's just running at people, not getting shot in the chest. Like, you can actually see this. There's a guy behind him who's a bad guy. Somehow they ran past each other on this tiny bridge. And even the guy that he's killing had a gun and just ran up to him. It's just ludicrous world building. Pretty much Zack Snyder just says, I want it to look cool. I don't care about anything else. So it's just the most shallow, surface level bullshit ever. Cora and Gunnar stop faking dead, kill the medics that took him in. And now they're in the ship. So she can go wreak havoc while he hides kind of like a little bitch in the ship they flew in on. And you can see now that the good guys beat the first wave, they've graduated to the second wave. So they brought in way more men, this big spider tank thing, more standard looking tanks. But nothing really changes. They just kind of keep holding them off. This super threatening, totally evil intergalactic empire can't take over a fucking farm. And Zack Snyder has another moment where he's inspired / more poorly does another version of something else. Pick whatever you want. She swims through the water with a knife in her mouth. Predator, maybe. I'm sure there's a million other things like this. I want to share this image just because I think it's funny. So she uses her knife, kills a couple people with guns, obviously. Runs over and grabs a rocket launcher and shoots this spider tank thing from like point blank. It does knock her down, but look how close she is. If this was Halo Combat Evolved, she would just be blown across the map right now. And this is really funny too. This is in like the engine room of the ship. Cora is putting bombs on this central location, which I'm assuming is like the core of the engine. And what we've seen a little bit is when she falls off this bridge thing, there's people shoveling coal into the engine to power it. The intergalactic space vessel. And then she puts all these bombs on it that glow like bright red. And just no one does anything. And they don't notice them until right before they explode. But they're not even hidden. They're just sitting on the front of it. There's like 6 or 8 of them just blinking and bright. And also, I have no idea how they work, if they're on a timer or what. Because the way the timing works is they're about to use this thing to charge their big cannon and take out the village. And somehow the bombs know to go off. I don't know if it's because they're powered by this thing charging and then they all blow up, or if you're supposed to write that in for yourself, or if she just knew the exact timing and it just worked out for drama. I have no clue. And also this thing looks like a giant person hunched over, puking out fire or whatever, and the blue things look like hair. I have no idea why it's designed like that, but this part where she's standing is very clearly a face. Noble realizes that Cora is on the ship, so he's like, okay, screw it, we don't need the grain, blow up the village and let's just leave. So after we've gotten 4 hours of them wanting grain from this one little village, he goes, we got her, I'll get my Senate seat, and we lost a bunch of men, so we don't even need the grain. Awesome. Here we get some more just kind of crappy action with the snake jaw girl, where she's like rolling around on the ground and everyone just runs up to her and lets her shoot them, and no one can shoot her for some reason. And then we get the scene where the robot comes in with his weird cape and little antlers. There's pretty much been no build up to this at all. He's had about 5 minutes of screen time in 2 movies, and he just shows up and wrecks shit. And I guess whatever he's made out of, all of their armor should be made out of, because he gets shot a bunch and is just like, meh, good to go. And some more excellent world building from Zack Snyder here. This guy is looking through a periscope to aim their biggest cannons that they need to launch like nukes at the surface. And he's aiming with rotary wheels. Like he's spinning this handle, and that's what turns this giant fucking space turret. And the aiming is just him with a periscope that zooms in a little bit. Like what kind of ass backwards intergalactic government empire is this? That you can have ships all across the galaxy and you can't develop a gun that just rotates? I mean, they have literal fucking AI. We just saw a robot destroy a bunch of shit. And they don't even have a gun that has power steering to aim. Wild. Cora swings down from the elevator when these guys are going to get on it, kicks the front guy, and they all stumble backwards like bowling pins. All 115 pounds of her knocks back like 15 grown men in the hallway. And then she literally just walks at them and shoots, never gets shot. Then eventually she kills the blue sword guy and takes his sword, so we can get Obi-Wan versus Darth Vader. So like I said, her bombs go off just in the nick of time. The cannon suddenly spins and shoots off in the distance, and we see it's a big nuke that would have just obliterated the village. This is actually an alright idea, but the execution sucks ass. So now that the ship engine's blown, it's like sucked into the gravity well of the planet. So the ship is falling and they're still fighting, but it's just kind of dumb and they flail a lot back and forth. And I don't know how these not lightsabers work. Kryptonian blades or whatever the subtitles say. And the movie just goes crazy. So they're sliding down the ship fighting. She kicks him in the chest. He goes flying like 100 feet and his head hits this metal ledge and he should be like decapitated. But he just kind of walks it off. And I guess Zack Snyder wanted to pay an homage to the Matrix Reloaded special effects because this looks cartoony as shit. Let me see if I can play a little clip here and not get copyrighted. So yeah, absolutely atrocious. And then the movie goes even crazier and it has a worse one with Cora in like 10 seconds here. So he runs at her like full speed, tackles her and throws her headfirst into a wall. They're both already falling because they're in gravity now. She hits head first and again is just fine. I'll see if I can put another little clip in here without getting in copyright trouble. So you can see she flew a long ass way and good to go. He chokes her and wants to drag it out for drama. Surprising nobody, he ends up with a blue blade through his chest and Gunner just blew his back out. Look how much he's enjoying it. She slams the door on him, cuts his head off. Woo, good guys win, and we beat the same bad guy twice. He's the Bowser to our Mario, or the King K. Rool to our Donkey Kong. And then we get the massive ship slowly exploding, everything blowing up, and Cora and Gunner escape. I think Zach thought he was back in Man of Steel for a second here. Gunner dies, Cora's sad. He did have kind of an arc from thief to scaredy cat to kind of brave, I guess. He still kind of hides a lot. But there's the skeleton of something good there at least. And the rebels that we haven't heard from since part 1 show up and take care of the rest of the battle. So the good guys win. Village is saved. Some people died for grain, some didn't. Hurrah. She tells the truth about who she is. She finds out the princess isn't dead, which anyone with 2 brain cells to rub together already fucking knew. They showed her for one scene last movie, and it was to say that she could bring stuff back to life. So shocker, she's not dead. And yeah, it sets up for a 3rd movie. Hopefully they don't get it. It does not deserve it. These 2 movies were horrible. A good editor might have been able to cut them down from 4.5 hours to about 3, and a better script would have cut it down to about 2. But yeah, there you go. Rebel Moon Part 2, The Scargiver. Zack Snyder just has complete control of the reins, and no one is saying anything to him, so he's just getting to indulge in all his worst habits. If you've seen the movie, let me know what you think. I try to respond to all the comments that aren't just insults. Like and subscribe and all that. Thanks. See ya.